Sorry about that, everybody. That's what happens when you share your screen in the beginning. Anyway, thanks so much for letting me know you couldn't hear me. I'm Cassie Papandrea. I'm the advertising director of the Albany Business Review, and welcome to our first executive forum of 2023. This is a series that brings together industry experts to offer tips and insights on topics that are important and valuable to our audience. Before we begin today's program, I have 2 tips for you for successful interaction during today's event. The first is we have the chat feature open, which thank you so much for everyone that used that before to let me know I was on mute. If you want to send a message, please make sure you check your drop-down menu and choose all panelists attendees or everyone. It can vary depending on your version of Zoom. Second, we'll be taking audience questions throughout the program. You can enter those questions into the Q&A feature in your toolbar. We encourage you to use that feature to ensure questions don't get overlooked in the chat. You can also send a message to ABR staff working behind the scenes, hi Nicole, and she will help you out if they have any issues. Finally, we're giving away a $25 gift card to bookshop.org to one registrant today. If you have not already, you can enter the giveaway using the link that Nicole put in the chat for everybody. We'll usually draw that before the end of today's program. The latest federal jobs data offers yet another sign the intense battle for talent isn't likely to end in the near future. A divide remains between the number of open jobs and the number of unemployed. That divide has fueled turnover and rising wages over the past couple of years. Today, we're joined by 3 industry experts who will share their top tips and expertise on how to find the best talent, what candidates are looking for in a company, and how to manage some of the ongoing and unique challenges in hiring and retaining employees. Our experts are Martin Patrick, Senior HR Consultant Manager with GTM Payroll Services, Ryan Thomas, Executive Vice President of Business Development at redShift Recruiting, and Renee Walrath, President and CEO of Walrath Recruiting. Welcome, everyone.
Morning.
There's Martin. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you? So let's get started with a little bit of a sense of how the industry has changed over the last year, because I know things are ever evolving. Renee, can you give us your sense on how the industry has changed over the last year?
Yes, we're seeing the majority of our clients are back in the office. Pretty much, like I was sharing earlier, was like 80% of our clients are back in the office, and 17% hybrid, and about 3% are remote, which is interesting, compared to last year and obviously a couple of years ago.
Ryan, are you seeing similar in your industries?
We're specialized in tech, and we were talking earlier that has so we see a little bit more of hybrid and remote still, but it's definitely shifting a bit more back to the office.
Makes sense. Martin, how about you?
Same thing. We have a wide variety of clients from different industries, and it's more of a hybrid. And again, very few that are totally remote.
Interesting. Martin, I'll stick with you. What are some trends that are emerging in recruitment and attraction of professionals this year?
What I'm seeing is a concerted effort by employers of reaching out to candidates in different forums. And the typical one that is done by most employers is reaching out through Indeed. That's what they've done in the past, and they're not finding the quality candidates they're looking for. So they're looking at professional organizations and other venues where they can find candidates. And it's still for my clients, it's still using the connections with the employees making referrals. It's been very helpful.
Interesting. Renee, how about you?
Some of our clients are offering sign-on bonuses to attract talent. I've also seen a few of our clients call back former employees that have left and realized the grass wasn't greener somewhere else and taken them back. Also offering better benefits to employees that will attract employees to join their team.
Interesting. Ryan?
I think it starts with companies building a brand, a well-known brand in the marketplace, somebody that a place that employees want to go to. I think using data-driven recruitment to find the best talent out there, and I think targeting more passive job seekers than the people that are just advertising on the just going to an ad. I think, like Martin said, referrals, asking your employees. And I think a big thing with all companies is just speeding up their recruitment process. If you're taking weeks on end or months on end to hire somebody or get somebody through that process, you're going to lose.
Interesting. So one of the audience questions we had before as part of the registration was, what are some of the challenges companies are facing in terms of recruitment? Ryan, it sounds like that is one of those challenges. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Well, I think you have to understand that the best people are interviewing at multiple places, sending their resumes multiple places. So you're in a competitive fight for finding the best people out there. So again, in order to do that, you need to have your tracking system up to date. You need to move them through in a proper manner. You need to have your ducks in a row as far as scheduling manager team interviews and just getting through that process, to the quickest and best of your ability if they're the right candidate.
Martin, what kind of challenges are you seeing companies face in terms of recruitment?
Well, certainly the number of qualified candidates out there. That is number one. I think that the second thing is that the finding candidates that are really interested in the organization, understanding the organization. Many, candidates may know about your company, but they really have no idea what your company's about. And that has to be, they need to have that education early in the process to understand why they would be coming to your company, because they have choices. So that's that. It's still an employee market out there.
Renee, any other challenges that you're seeing?
Compensation. We've seen companies where what they're paying these individuals for certain roles aren't at the right salary range. So doing more of a compensation analysis across the board on salaries for the individuals. So I guess what I'm saying is if a company's not paying the people appropriately across the board, comparatively to other companies in their industries, people aren't going to want to switch jobs and go to another organization. This is what I'm saying.
Interesting. One of the questions that we just had in the chat, I'll stop for a second, is how do tuition benefit plans help attract and retain employees? And just on a broader scale, because you were just talking about compensation, Renee, how do benefits play into kind of being more competitive in that field?
That benefits today, whether it's healthcare, to, like you said, tuition reimbursement, PTO time, is extremely important to individuals, more so today than it was, say, 10 years ago. And back to your question, tuition reimbursement, we've actually, there's been candidates that's a huge perk for someone, because that shows that the company values them and values the education, and that would in return, have someone stay longer with an organization.
Ryan, are you seeing many of the companies you work with do tuition reimbursement, or are there other unique benefits?
Sure. Well, I think as far as tuition reimbursement, yes. I mean, that's always been a great way to retain and keep talent. But for us on the tech space, offering training in certain types of, like CCNA or certain softwares that a company is using. I know, or even our marketing person, we had do a training because if he was going to use certain robotics for some of the marketing things, we wanted him to be up to speed on that. So I think that, if companies are offering that, getting them involved, that's obviously a great way to retain people.
Martin, anything you want to add to the benefit side?
On the benefits itself, I mean, I think there's an expectation, I think, from most candidates that you're going to have competitive benefits. I find that it's very specific for candidates. There's certain things they're looking for. It may be tuition assistance, and maybe certain contributions from the employer for health insurance, or maybe a certain amount of time off. And they're asking those questions early on in the interview process to make a determination as they're comparing, offers they're receiving.
Ryan, I'm going to start with you for our next question because I know you work a lot in tech. So we're hearing about a lot of companies, especially in tech, doing layoffs. What insights do you have on this trend? And are there ways for other companies who may have openings or growth to see as this as an opportunity for them?
So yeah, crazy, layoffs that started really the end of last year and kind of transitioned into this year. So, just to throw out some numbers, Meta, Facebook, 11,000, Microsoft, 11,000, Amazon, 18,000, Salesforce, 10% of its staff, so approximately 174 tech companies already laid off 56,000 employees in 2023. I mean, that is that's crazy. So it has certainly affected us. It's interesting. It's kind of cool and appropriate that we actually just hired somebody internally from Meta. She was somebody that was local here in the Albany area and had been laid off by Meta. So we're super excited for Roxanne to come aboard. But yeah, it's an opportunity for tech companies here in Albany to grab talent for sure.
Renee, what are you seeing in that sphere? Are you seeing many layoffs or opportunities from it?
The same as Ryan said, the last quarter of 2022, we had some of our larger clients laying off individuals. But with that being said, it does offer an opportunity. We were able to place some of these people for other organizations. So, it's happening. But I'll also say, I feel like, you hear on the news doom and gloom of all these, companies laying off, but we live in Albany, right? And I feel like living here in Albany, we don't get as affected as much as these, the other areas of the world, I guess I'll say, and so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Yeah.
So not much of an effect in this region you're seeing, but potentially some opportunities for companies in this region, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Martin, I'm going to come back to you for a second because you brought up some things about having competitive benefits. So what are some of the other top things that candidates are looking for when considering offers, and what might make them walk away?
The biggest one I'm seeing from many candidates is flexibility of scheduling. If they can work different hours, if they can mix in, again, office and remote work, it is very attractive. There's almost an expectation, especially in an office environment, that there's going to be some time away from the office for candidates, that they have that flexibility of schedule. It's a big consideration.
Ryan, how about you? What are some things that you see candidates considering in offers, and any interesting things that have made them walk away?
Yeah, I mean, I think salary in hybrid, a year ago, it's funny how much has changed in a year in this industry, and it typically does year to year. But a year ago, it was remote. Now, people are starting to say, okay, well, probably can't get remote necessarily, but hybrid. So, that's what we hear consistently from employees. And, I've had a bunch of calls in the last week of employees that have been told to come back to the office. They're reaching out to me saying, I tried it, I don't want to do it, so find me something that's hybrid. And then salary. I mean, salaries were pushed last year big time. We're starting to see that come down as well. So certainly if we're talking about attracting, retaining, it is salary and flexibility. If not that, you go back to good benefits, you go back to good culture, you go back to setting expectations on schedules of work, and just keeping people happy. I think Martin and I were talking yesterday, well, all of us, Renee too, and I think retention is going to be the big theme in 2023. So
Renee, similar question, but because you brought up compensation earlier too as one of the major factors in offers, what are some best practices for determining compensation for successful recruitment?
Doing a compensation analysis, comparing industries, standards of how someone's being paid, for example, like if it's a CPA firm or a law firm, just, doing an analysis across the board, industry as well as area, because you could have someone, say moving from New York City or Boston coming back home, say here, compensation here is going to obviously be less. And so again, just doing an analysis on comp.
Martin, any strategies you'd add to that?
Yes, I mean, we, just to give you an idea, we recently did a survey with 24 of our clients, and these are different size organizations for different size industries, over 100 employees, under 100 employees. There are three things that came out that they're focusing on for retention. And the first one was a market study for compensation, as Renee said. That is the biggest thing. They want to know, the employer really needs to know what the competitive wages are, but the employees are doing this on their own. If you don't think they are, you're very, very foolish. They have an understanding what the market bears for them. And flexibility hours, as I talked about, and then also employee recognition. Those are the three things the employers are really concerned about and focusing on.
Ryan, anything you want to add to that?
Well, we're super excited. It'll be hopefully coming out in the next week here. We've been working on it for over a year to have a tech salary guide that we're putting out, a RedShift tech salary guide that's geared towards exclusively tech in both the capital region and national. And we put a ton of analytics into it, both local studies as far as the positions we filled, but also using Google and Indeed to kind of get a median salary study on all these positions. So hopefully it'll be a great tool for people here to kind of price their tech positions properly.
Interesting. I'm going to stop for a couple of audience questions we have here because I think they're kind of relevant. Other than online recruiting like Indeed, et cetera, going to job fairs and employee referrals, are there any new ideas or ways to find qualified applicants to fill positions? And Renee, I'll start with you for that one.
Well, if I gave you that answer, then you wouldn't really want to use our services, right?
Right. I think the answer is hire a recruiter, right? Anybody else have other answers? But I think that probably is the answer, right?
I think it goes to new ways. I think recruiting, what we do is hard. It is a lot. Last year, what I said is the secret is hunting. You can't post an ad. I think I said a year ago, you can't post an ad and get responses and hire people that way. You have to diligently build relationships, and these relationships might take 6 months, might take a year, might take a year and a half to to cultivate. You ask your employees, who do they know? You ask people that you meet in the grocery store, who do you know? It's what we do is a ton of touches. I say touches, but touches as far as like just constantly talking to people.
Exactly. Yeah.
One other question that had to do, I think, with some of the benefits, are you seeing any agencies, or I'm guessing clients in general, adopt 4-day work weeks?
No.
No, I haven't.
Not a thing yet.
I think I've seen one.
Oh, too bad for anybody that was hoping for that one, I guess. All right, Martin, I'm going to go back to you again. What are some best practices in terms of onboarding a new hire?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of them. I would start really with the recruitment process, as Brian mentioned, having those touches. So guiding people through the hiring process is important. So once you've made a decision and made the offer and they've accepted the offer, is keeping in touch with them. Many times people get lost and they don't know what to do. And you need to guide them through the process as effectively as you can. And then once they're on board, is getting them to know your organization rather quickly, making those contacts. We have a policy where we have them meet with the different department directors immediately to understand the whole organization, beside the mission and the culture, understanding the connections between the departments. I think that's important, establishing that right away.
Ryan, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I'm sure Renee can attest to this, that, it's always odd that we make a placement and then, really kind of turn the candidate over to the client. And then in many senses, which is fine, we're the ones that are kind of helping that person get to the point that they start. But I'm often surprised when a company doesn't reach out to the candidate and say, hey, here's your new start, here's what's going on. I mean, I think you'd all be shocked about how that process with a lot of companies isn't refined, but it is super important in this day to set expectations, perhaps line up a future employee with a mentor within the company, to kind of help them set expectations of what their first day looks like, what their first week looks like, all of that.
And I also think it starts really from day one when you're just starting the interview process to, make sure you're constantly communicating with the candidate. Again, if this is just a company and a candidate, talking to each other, but because that experience itself, if it's a bad experience, a candidate may not want to move forward with an employer. So.
Before you go farther, Renee, let's stick with that because we did have some questions about interviewing, and I think this is kind of a good transition. So what are some of the best practices in interviewing, and how do you know if somebody's a good fit?
And keep, communicating with them, and keep them, informed. And there's some people that only want to be notified via text messages, or it could be email, or it could be a phone call. Everyone's different, but again, understanding that and working with that. But I guess I would say, well, it's communication is huge. It's just keeping in touch with the candidate. There's so many times, candidates will feel like they've been ghosted by an employer, prospective employer, or if it takes too long, if the process is too long, like Ryan said earlier, you'll lose the candidate. You might not even lose them to another employer. You're just going to lose them because they're thinking you're not engaged with them, so they're going to be disengaged. So,
go ahead. Sorry, was that you?
I don't know.
Martin, I was going to go to Martin for a second though, because you mentioned interviewing in a few questions back and making sure that the company is letting the interviewee know about them. Can you tell us a little bit more about how to incorporate that effectively into an interview process?
Well, I certainly, when I do interviews, and I don't do them often, but when I do, I ask them what they know about the company, and then I'll fill in some gaps so they understand what the company's about, not just their position in the company, what the company stands for and how they operate. And, if I sense that this is not something that they're interested in, continuing the interview may be of no value. If they're really looking at other types of organizations, because I will ask them during the interview process where else they're interviewing, what other considerations, what other positions are they considering, and if it's local, I may know the company, so I know what they're looking for. It's helpful.
Ryan, anything you want to add?
No, I think these guys covered. I mean, I think when you're interviewing a candidate, make sure the questions are very specific to the job description and what you want done. It's often, funny in our seat where, after an interview, the client will come back and say, well, does the person have Excel? And I'm like, well, you just spent an hour with the person. Probably should come up. I think, and I think being very specific with your questions, don't be shy, don't be surfacey. And then that relates to, how a candidate feels about the interview. Was the company confident? Were they confident about what they were looking for, the skills that they needed? So yeah, I just think it's being, really precise with your questions.
Ryan, I'll stick with you for a second because ghosting did come up when Renee mentioned it a little bit. And I think we've talked about this previously, but what suggestions do you have on how to prevent candidates from ghosting during an interview process?
We love ghosting. It happens all the time in our industry, and it's super peculiar. It'll be like, hey, what's going on with this candidate? No, I haven't been able to reach them in days. But yeah, I mean, I think going back to we were saying touches. I mean, you need to just be in close contact with them. Have good relevant interaction. Don't be scared to just call the person. Perhaps email them as well. Text them if you really need to get a hold of somebody, but I think it's it happens. It's probably inevitable in some sense, but it's definitely a challenge.
Renee, you want to add anything to that?
And yeah, it's just keeping in touch with them, but it's you never know. People are people, right? They sometimes you could be talking to somebody yesterday and then you're trying to call them and they're not getting back to you. It can be it's very frustrating. Very frustrating. And then, sometimes I've even had people down the road that then have ghosted us, reach out to us, say a year or two later, and I'll ask them what happened. It's frankly because they didn't want to tell us that they found another job, or, it's just be honest, just tell us, but so I don't know. I wish I would understand why people do that.
Yeah.
Just to pause there with you, Renee, for a second too. You mentioned that sometimes potential employees, interviewees feel like they've been ghosted by the company. Can you just expand upon that a little bit so people can maybe avoid doing that?
So there's, we hear from just submitting a resume, not getting a response, or having an interview, but then not getting any feedback. We even get that at times. We, have a client that will interview a candidate and we'll follow up. And then you got the candidate following up with us. And it's like, we don't want to necessarily say it's not us because we don't want to have a negative impact on our client, but it's just a matter of, again, it comes back to communication and, just being upfront, and whether you like the candidate, don't like the candidate. Sometimes things happen, but again, it's just back to keeping an open dialogue and communication.
On that, and Martin, I'll go to you with this audience question because it's kind of along the same lines. What is an appropriate timeline from posting to selecting a candidate, and what is an acceptable amount of time to search before changing strategies?
I guess that would depend on the job, but usually if we're posting a position, first of all, I would say that you don't post a position unless you have the job description ready to go and you can discuss all the aspects of the job. And I know employers sometimes are in a rush to get the position filled, but they have, especially if it's a new one and it's really not completed yet, and have that first, because you're going to need to have that for your interview. Again, certain specific positions or ones that are going to require special skills typically are posted for a longer period of time because you're trying to find qualified candidates, where other ones where there may be a lot of candidates coming through for a position, you probably are going to be leaving it up posted for a very shorter period of time. So maybe a couple weeks, but a lot depends on how many quality candidates you get, how long that, initially in that first posting, determine how long it's going to be out there.
Ryan, what's the typical time frame that you would follow?
An hour? No, I don't think that's realistic. But no, I think I agree 100% with Martin. Having it, we get a lot of clients that say, I think I'm looking for this, or put feelers out. Be ready to move. If you're ready to move and you have that candidate come in, a lot of times the right candidate is maybe within the first 5 or 6 that you see. The longer that process gets drawn out, it typically becomes difficult. But yeah, having an intent to hire. I think as far as when you change your strategy, I think in this market, use different options right from day one. You're going to post an ad, you're going to ask for referrals, you're going to have your internal recruiters look for people, but also perhaps engage a contingency firm where if they're the ones that find the person, then you end up hiring them. I think it's critical the longer, and we're like that here, the longer a position stays open, the amount of resources and just money to the company that costs is a lot. So
before we switch, go ahead, Renee.
My thought was also look at the job description, and perhaps either you're asking for too much, and I say too much, your expectations are too much for the compensation that you're willing to pay. I guess, evaluate the job. If you're not getting candidates, evaluate the job itself compared to what you're willing to pay, and you may have to tweak that a bit.
So before we switch over to
Good
the
point.
retention side of things, which I think is going to be the other huge part of our conversation, I'm going to leave this, there's a lot of audience questions. I'm going to leave this open to whichever one of you feels best answering it. But there's a lot of audience questions about how to recruit more of the frontline, blue collar, warehouse, construction, more service industry employees when things like flexibility, work from home, different types of wages aren't necessarily an option for those types of jobs. Do any of you have advice for seeking out those types of candidates?
I think it's, higher wages, especially for the harder to fill shifts, like overnight. I know that's easier said than done for some companies. I think, heavy transparency with, hours and expectations and job requirements are key. I think a lot of times in those positions, people get into them and it's not quite what was laid out in the interview process. And then I think, just keeping scheduling, consistent. If you want to retain people, keep them to kind of what you had promised from the beginning. But no, I know those areas. I mean, we get calls constantly. I know those areas are very tough to hire from. Again, I go to internal referrals. I think that your top employees typically have friends or relatives that they could help attract into those roles.
Or they could go to like the local community colleges and see if there's any, recent 2-year college grads or even the high schools, and we also, some of our clients I know are offering like small bonuses, but for like perfect attendance for a quarter to retain those individuals too.
Martin, I saw you're nodding your head. Anything you want to add?
I see employee referral as the biggest area for that. That having a relative or a friend that the employee knows is an invaluable way of finding candidates in that environment.
And it sounds like maybe adding a referral bonus could be helpful to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's kind of switch gears to the retention side of things. Kind of a broader question, we'll narrow it down a little bit, but what are some strategies for retention that companies can implement or you're seeing that they are implementing? Renee, I'll start with you.
Well, I would say that you need to foster employee engagement, create a sense of connection with your employees, where they feel valued. Listen to them. They all have great advice, just listening to them, making them feel a part of the team, part of the goal, just again, communicating with them to also as to where do we see ourselves, this year, where do we see ourselves in the first quarter? Just so it's open dialogue.
Martin, you want to go next?
Yes, I agree with that. I think the dialogue is important. The employees understand where the company's at, where it's headed. And one of the strategies we have done recently is do some of you may know what are called stay interviews, where you actually interview the staff after a period of time and talk with them and find out what they think of the company and where they want to be in the company. We've started a process called a cultural review, where we actually interview these are primarily for small companies or departments, where you're interviewing everyone in the company, going through a list of questions. It's expanded from what you think of just a certain employee survey, where you're actually meeting with them and discussing their role. And so if they understand the organizational structure, where can they be in the structure, where do they want to go, and their relationships. I think that's important. And they want a voice, and this is an opportunity for them to have their voice.
Ryan, anything you want to add to that?
No, great stuff. I mean, I think we do a kind of if Martin's called it a stay, we do a monthly meeting. I mean, I think it's just incredible. You work so hard to get, the right people, and they're so valuable in any industry, and we feel the same in ours. But there's obviously, a good happy hour every once in a while usually keeps people happy. I mean, I think getting back to having people in the office, it is nice to get everybody together in person, looking at each other. And then, but at the same time, we have conceded for certain employees, more flexibility as well to retain them. So, and just building a healthy, company culture, where people like to hang out, like to laugh, like to smile.
From the audience questions in this kind of culture realm, we have a question that says, I have been hearing a lot about company culture and how an employee views how they will fit in. Have you heard this at all? And, what does that mean to you? How do we incorporate this into the interview process? Who wants to take that one first?
I'll take it. I think that they need to meet with the team. So a lot of times we're still seeing a lot of our first interviews virtual like this, right? But majority of our clients then second interview will be a face-to-face to get a feel of the company environment. And I think it's good to have you as the prospective employee meet others in the firm, talk to them, ask them, what do they like about working here? As much as the employer is interviewing you, I think the prospective employee should interview the employee. You know what I'm saying? And talk to the other employees. Why do you like working here? How long have you been here? So that would help. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We actually have one particular employee that, kind of gets final say on everybody. If they don't pass her, then we can't hire the person. But I'd also add a lot of companies and clients we deal with do use personality assessments as well, and really live and die by those. So I think that and have had great success. So that can be a tool as well.
Martin, anything you want to add to that?
I agree with the personality or other assessments. It can be a supplemental tool to the interview. During the interview process is if they can talk to the individuals other than the interviewer, if that can be done, the company should consider doing it.
Martin, is there a good one that you recommend, or is there a way that you recommend people find the right one for their company?
For the assessment tool?
Yeah.
There are a lot of them out there. Obviously, cost is a factor, and time and effort isn't the other part of it. They can be found everywhere. I mean, there's some on-site. You can Google some. There's different ones out there that are valuable. I mean, we use one where I work, but there's other ones other companies use. They've been out there a long time.
So it sounds like maybe just assess a few and see what's the best fit for
your company. I mean, you want to try to get a feel for, there are ones that are geared towards, will this person be successful in that position? And that's what I think, want to know. It's more than just their personality, because they're being hired for a specific position.
Also from our audience questions, we have one that says, due to the war on talent, how are companies looking at retention of their young professionals, individuals that will be in managerial positions 5+ years from now, but are currently entry level? And I think that maybe leads to some development opportunities in the retention side of things as well. So what advice do you have for, retaining young professionals?
That's a good one. That's we have ours is an industry where a lot of the employees we have been doing it for quite a while, which is great. I mean, that's awesome to find, but we always try to make hires of younger professionals, because you need that sense of they come at things from a different perspective. So training and retaining those people is critical. So we spend a lot of time at that.
I think it's like Ryan said, training them, mentoring them, listening to them, because the younger generation has a lot to offer and sees things differently than, say, I see. And I welcome that. I think it's a good thing. Again, just listening to them, see what motivates them.
Martin, I know you started to answer before. Anything you can add?
But this leads back to having those discussions with the employees as soon as they're aboard, and I find that many young professionals are looking for opportunities rather quickly, and you need to present them to them because the other companies are doing that. So if you don't want to engage with them, there's a good chance you could be losing them. So they want those, opportunities to advance in their career, and hopefully they'll do it with you. But it's foolish to expect them to stay stagnant and not change, because that's not what I'm seeing. They want that growth.
It's tricky. A lot of times they come out, with some very interesting salary, requirements out of college. We see that often, and it's kind of, and in some cases, so like developers and software engineers, the real sharp ones can get that, but other candidates that maybe have a marketing degree or business degree, to ask for, 75, to 90,000 is not necessarily realistic here in Albany from what we see. But it's also interesting. I was talking to somebody in the office, like, about retirement benefits. To me, we don't hear a lot of recent grads really that concerned about that. It's something that certainly I'm concerned. I'm sure all of us here on the panel are concerned, but as far as recent grads, that necessarily isn't something that they're thinking about.
Unless you're a finance major.
Sticking with this kind of theme, and before we do our giveaway in a second too, one more question before that. It says professional loyalty to a particular company seems to have eroded. Is that an ongoing trend, or do your customers seem to aspire to long-term engagements and placements?
I see the biggest factor is if it's especially in this area, there's a lot of not-for-profits. If somebody's really tied to the mission and really believe strongly in the company, that's less of a factor. Yeah, that's where the loyalty is. It is sometimes more to the company and the mission than it is to the position, which is interesting.
Ryan or Renee, anything you want to add to that?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. We get, we obviously get a lot of calls about people that are looking to make changes, and a big reason for that is they have lost faith in the company and the leadership, their manager, and a lot of times, we talk a lot about compensation, but a lot of times it's not compensation. It's just not feeling appreciated. The direction of the company isn't going the right way. The culture isn't going the right way. They aren't getting along with their manager. So, I don't know in a lot of sense how you could ever stop some of that.
It could be like, Ryan, like you're saying, there could be changes at the top in management. People are feeling overworked, unappreciated, burnout, that they just want to then make a move.
So before we go through some closing questions, I'll announce our giveaway winner. And that is Angela Alozi from Youth Research Inc. So Angela, we will email you your gift card. Thanks so much to everybody who entered that giveaway. We really appreciate that. So I'm gonna go to one question and then try and take one more audience questions before we do closing thoughts. So my question is, when is the right time for a company to work with a professional like yourselves? How do they know it's time to bring somebody on?
When they can't find the talent, and honestly, I think they should just get a relationship with a recruiter, just to understand what we do, how we do what we do, so that if they ever do need, our services, they can reach out to us.
Yeah, I think especially if your first thought is I'm going to run an ad and see what I get, then I would definitely say that you're probably gonna not win as well, or not be in front of your other competitors, because that is not working in this market. If you use a firm like ourselves, you're getting an existing database of thousands of people, relationships, so that have been in play for 7 to 10 years. So I think that yes, that there's a cost to our service, but at the same time there is definitely a cost to having a position remain open for a month to 6 weeks as well.
All right, and anything you want to add to that?
From a company's perspective, if you don't have someone internally that has a good network and knows how to network. And if you don't want to devote the resources or the time and effort, or you don't have the expertise internally, then you have to go outside. You have to look at a search firm. Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask an audience question that might be a trick question, but what is more important, work experience or a degree?
You're asking me? I'm going to say
All of you.
Well, that's a tough one because I have this debate with my son, my oldest son, all the time. He would say work experience, but I would say it depends. I'd have to know what's on their resume. Do you know what I mean? Like what job are they applying for, and what experience do they have?
When
I
you're
mean,
evaluating,
so looking for that college degree, believe it or not, even for a receptionist, I'm going to say, you know, I'm not, and that there's nothing wrong with the receptionist. Receptionist is a hard job. So, you know, I think it depends on the job. I think it depends on the job.
It's funny, my perspective on this has changed over the last 10 years. I mean, I think there is such a value to getting an education, getting a degree. I know there's some companies where it's super important, but I know there's a lot of talk of about getting your token degree or whatever it may be. I think experience these days, I think more than ever, there's a value to candidates that are aggressive in getting internships and getting experience, getting the personality and the communication skills versus just having a nice degree and not having any actual work experience.
Martin, what do you think?
I would agree that experience is a key factor, and especially as Ryan touched upon the soft skills, the ability to communicate and interact and work effectively with people. Sometimes that's lost in getting a degree. I would, for most of the positions that we do recruitment for, it is the experience factor that makes the difference.
It's interesting because I would say 80% of our clients expect a college degree.
All right. I said it was a trick question. So, so I didn't think it had a right answer. One more question from the audience that's a kind of specific, but I think interesting across industries is how frequently do people accept sales roles with 100% commission in 2023? Is it that, or are you seeing more people offer salary plus base? And I think that goes probably more across just sales, but a lot of different industries. Any have insights on that? How often are you seeing commission-based positions be accepted?
100%.
Yeah,
I would think. I mean, it's gone down. It has to. I mean, of course, we wouldn't see that because if it was 100% commission, we wouldn't get it.
You wouldn't be recruiting.
Yeah. So, but with that being said, I mean, if you're having a sales position, you're going to want some type of base to live on. So I would think it's the way the economy is, people need, no, I would think it would be going down. Wouldn't motivate me.
Yeah, I think there's got to be an investment in the person. There has to be a mutual investment. Certainly, I think you need some type of base. We don't see full commission roles. I have a client that's funny in regards to hiring salespeople. He's like 50-50. He's like, it's 50-50. One out of every two is going to work out. Perhaps lower actually.
So before we close out today, I want to give you all an opportunity to kind of leave our audience with your most important takeaways, because we've discussed a lot of stuff. So before we end today, if you could leave the audience with one or two key takeaways that they can take back to their job or even implement in the next couple of weeks, what would that be for you? And Martin, I'm going to put you on the spot and start with you.
Okay. I again, for recruitment and retention, for me, it's for the employer and for the candidate, it's the work culture. What are they stepping into? And have you developed a culture that is accepting new employees and giving them what they need to grow and develop within your organization? If you're not doing that, you're going to have, I find, turnover, more turnover than you want to have.
Ryan, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think, retention, I think that retention of your good employees, though, we talk about retention. That doesn't mean you should retain everybody, obviously. Every company has, employees that the right thing to do is move on from them. I think moving quickly is that came up a few times today. Like get your hiring process organized so that when you start interviewing, who's going to meet the person in what timetable, and you're ready to make an offer at the end of that. And then just consult. You don't necessarily have to use a recruiter, but feel free to consult with us in regards to salaries, what we're seeing out in the market.
And Renee, you want to close this out?
Yes, and I would say to retain the people you have, to keep communicating with them, keep an open dialogue, listen to them, and work with them.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights. For everyone in the audience, you will receive a recording of today's program. You're welcome to share that throughout your companies and with your colleagues. It'll also be posted to our website. That email will go out tomorrow with that recording for everyone. Brian, Renee, Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the insights. I know there was a lot of questions, and maybe we'll be back at this again next year. We'll see what the year holds, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great day.